Oh boy. Sorry. Alright. Hello. Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 3rd of December 2025. It's been almost like morning at 8:42 a.m. I am actually in front of the sun. I am actually sucking up the sun or soaking up the sun, whatever you wanted to say. Yeah, it's cold. Yeah, it's fucking cold. Alright. Let's just jump into the question. Alright, yeah. Okay, the question is, what if animal could talk and vote? Oh, that's a good question. All right, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. And when I try to think about that reality or when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my knowledge and information and experience that I've been through and try to explain what would be that particular answer. Okay, what if question is something little bit interesting. It's not a kind of like a typical question where what is actually 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. No, it's a question is actually about why 2 plus 3 is not 7. So basically, when you ask this question, then you just have to understand what is actually meaning of 2, 3 plus equal to and things like that. So basically, is this thing you just actually know more about the number than kind of like a simply just actual kind of like a question itself. The kind of like a question is kind of like a simply forced you to kind of like a question on its question itself. So that's why it kind of like a simply little bit interested way to give the answer. Okay. Disclaimer. The information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. It's just my opinion and opinion are subjective. Alright, now let's jump back to the question. The question says that what if animal could talk and vote? Like basically is this thing now if I just kind of like simply think about this particular question now, it just kind of like a giving me a random animated Pixar movie idea. Okay, yeah, like basically in this particular context they just kind of like assembly every kind of like animal could talk with the humans or talk with each other and things and that and when I try to talk about this particular context, the entire movie script is actually run through my eyes and kind of like things happen and things happen and things happen and things happen. But before that, I'm kind of like a question in myself first. Okay, question for the question itself first. Why do we think like that? Why we think that key animal could supposed to be talk and things like that? Why is that? Is because of that key we are trying to talk to the animal. Okay, yeah. Okay, how? Okay, so you have a dog, you have a cat, you might have some sort of pet at your home. Okay, yeah, and you have to kind of like teach them regarding about how to sit, how to walk, how to kind of like do this and that and that. Okay, yeah. Now some of the animal could learn really fast, some of the animal cannot able to learn really fast, but somehow most of the animal kind of like follows you, understand you. They're kind of like somebody try to know you and somewhat something kind of like somebody follow the order that you are kind of like given to them. Okay, like basically you just kind of like sit to the dog might kind of like somebody scared at first, but after some sort of time that dog might gonna sit. Okay, yeah. You have kind of like a some particular way to kind of like treat them regarding about the way that you are kind of like somebody, if that particular dog is actually follow the things that you said, then probably you have to give them a treat and that dog will kind of like understand even more and stuff like that, whatever. But this is the way that you could this is the way that you could actually communicate with the your animal and things like that. So that's why this kind of like a thought process comes like what if instead of I should supposed to be teach the dogs and cats and things like that, what if I could talk to the what if I could talk to the animal and things like that. And since then this kind of like a thought process is established that what if we could talk to the animal and things like that. And because of this thought process there are multiples of movies are actually established, animated movies and things and that those are kind of like a somebody try to replicate that idea in kind of like an animated web series world, so that what if kind of like a somebody those animal could talk and what if would be happen and things and that. There are multiple self example like Ice Age series, Zootopia, like basically every Pixar animated movie are kind of like a such thing that every animal actually talking to each other and things like that. Okay, but the question is that the why is not happening in real world. What is at least this thing? Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, so first of all is that I am human. Yeah, basically I am a human species. Okay, yeah, I can speak 3 languages. Marathi, the where I born. The Hindi is my national language, and English is somewhat something kind of like a really essential for grow your life and things like that. So I am actually speaking three language. By the way, at this time I'm actually learning Mandarin too. Okay, yeah, but still Mandarin is a kind of like a somewhat something little bit of like a very like a not that much fully cooked up. Okay, yeah, but I'm trying to learning. Okay, yeah, but these are kind of like a some language that I know. Okay, yeah. Do you kind of like a things that every person or every human on this planet could kind of like a speak the same language? Like might be English might be kind of like some language that probably most of the people would speak, but not most of the like basically is this thing na, every human on this planet speaks very different language according to the religious, according to the regional, according to the where it belongs and things and that. And we don't really have any kind of like a proper communication language that we could communicate with the other humans. Even if you know English and things and that, we cannot able to communicate that person. So I have to be asked this question to myself. We are the same species and still we cannot communicate with other same species. Then how do we supposed to expect that every animal could kind of like speak some sort of language, and we might gonna listen them, or we might gonna understand, and they might gonna understand us? It's not. When I try to kind of like simply utilizing the language, it's a very very different. Like even if we are kind of like a same species of human, you might not understand the way that I'm speak, or the way that you speak I might not gonna understand. And this is what kind of like a somewhat something reality of truth, reality of the world. Okay, yeah. So even if we have kind of like a same species, we cannot expect to kind of like a somebody understand the same language. How do we supposed to expect kind of like a somebody similar mechanism with kind of like every animal? It's kind of like a somebody impossible in every possible way. Yeah, it's very impossible. It's not really that basically we should supposed to be talk with the cockroaches and talk with the kind of like a crocodile or any kind of like a birds and things like that. It's not harm. You can kind of like a somebody use multiple kind of like a things without language. Okay, let me give you things. The language that we are using for communication. Okay, yeah. But let me tell you one thing. When you try to communicate with the other species, you are not just try to communicate with the language. You are try to communicate with the kind of like assembly the language they might gonna understand. And what is that language? The universal language is to kind of like teach them regarding about that what exactly is this thing. Like teach them what is actually meaning of that and that. If the kind of like somebody the dog can kind of like a run, then you have to fetch some sort of thing, then dog would kind of like a run. Like basically when you do the physical activity, then this is the way that other kind of like some species might gonna understand regarding about what we should supposed to be do. But the communication is very low. It's not really that kind of like simply we just understand what is actually inside of their mind and stuff like that. No, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. So that's why we cannot able to communicate with a kind of like a simply any kind of like an animal or things like that, because it's nature wise or practical wise, it's impossible in every possible. It's a kind of like a simply finding an atom in entire universe. Probably you're gonna find a kind of like atom in the entire universe. It's not really that kind of like assembly, but a kind of like assembly. Imagine a kind of like assembly. A universe required a space where there is nothing, and you just have to find one atom. It is that really hard. It's not okay. And okay, if you not really understand what I'm trying to tell you is this thing. What kind of like animal that you are kind of like considering? Okay, dogs, cat, horse, cow, buffalo. Like is this the kind of like assembly the animal that you are thinking? Dude, in our planet there are quadrillions of animal. I'm saying quadrillions of animal and their species. Like it's like basically take a beetle. They have millions of mutation. They have millions of people. Like basically this thing that key and like insects are they have kind of like a millions of variation regarding about their species and things like that. Okay, yeah. I'm just talking about just the insect, and insects are in kind of like a trillions in number. Like basically the ants. I just kind of like a couple of days I was kind of like watching a video regarding about the corridor crew, and they have kind of like made a video regarding about how many ants are actually available in our planets, and they mentioned they have quadrillions. And it's the quadrillion word is kind of like a somebody very that he probably we just don't really understand, because what exactly quadrillion means what. Okay, yeah, we don't really understand the gravity of it. That video properly explained regarding about how many quadrillion ants look like. And this is what kind of like a somewhat something really scary things. Okay, I'm saying quadrillion. Okay, and I'm just kind of like thinking about the ants. They have so many insects and things and that and that and that. When you try to collect all the animal, you just might realize that, dude, this number is like that way, 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 way bigger than you think it is. Okay, yeah. Because let me tell you one thing, you might think that the entire human population in the world is almost like 8 billion, so probably we are in very higher number. That is definitely not. That is definitely not. Okay, yeah. As compared to the another species, dude, it's just like that we can't even compare the number of their existence. Okay, yeah. Like they are like basically the number of the insects are too much. Probably existing the number of the animal which kind of like a let's just say mammals or kind of like a have more than 5 feet longer animals, they have kind of like a limited in number probably. Okay, yeah. But still, is this thing that less than kind of like a 1 centimeter or less than kind of like a only 5 centimeter, they have kind of like abundance of kind of like animals and insects are available in the world, in the entire planet, by the way. Okay, I'm just talking about just a kind of like a such an animal who are kind of like exist on the planet, or sorry, exist on the land. What if you went to the underwater? My God. Okay, yeah, you are just counting the fish, boy oh boy. Like a fish are like so much, so many, so I don't know how many, how should I supposed to put the zeros in after the things. It's like too much, like too much. Okay, yeah. So if let's just imagine that particular consequences, let's imagine that particular thing. Let's just take a kind of like a random number. Okay, yeah, that kind of like considered as a how many kind of like an animal would be available. Okay, so let's just say what is the biggest number that I might gonna know. Biggest number that kind of like a practically exist. Let's just say like a 10 million quadrillion. Is it too much? 10 million quadrillion, that's very too much. Yeah, 10 million quadrillion. But is it 10 million quadrillion was too much? Okay, 10 quadrillion. Okay, 10 million quadrillion was, oh my God, that is too much. Okay, so 10 quadrillion. Okay, now 10 quadrillion means what? One quadrillion means thousands of billion. Okay, probably. Is it? Wait. Let me Google it. Let me Google. This kind of like a unit system is 1 QUADR 1 quadrillion in billion. So yeah, thousands of billion is called kind of like a 1 quadrillion. By the way, let me see another unit random. Okay, quadrillion, billion, and after the billion, no, they actually mention the quadrillion. Okay, yeah. So basically 1 quadrillion means thousands of billion. Okay, yeah. And 1 billion means like a thousands of million. So just do the calculation. It was like oh my God, that is a way much bigger number. Okay, yeah. So imagine this thing. Let's just say 10 quadrillion species are actually exist, and they are kind of like assembly talking. Okay, let's just say they speak kind of like the same language as the English. Okay, yeah. So how would be that particular world? Well, first of all is that it would be chaos in everywhere. Yeah, it just kind of like assembly chaos. Okay, let me give you the perspective. Have you ever kind of like listening the birds who are kind of like doing a sound like, just listen carefully. This dog is barking. This bird is kind of like doing choo 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 choo. Like basically this thing, this is the kind of like assembly the language they kind of like communicate. Okay, yeah. It's somewhat something annoying at some time, like the dog is actually barking. Sometime it kind of like feel really like a nice to kind of like a scene, a kind of like a bird who kind of like doing a choo choo and things like that. Okay, yeah. But what if they are both angry? A dog is angry, the bird is also angry too. But the way that they are kind of like somebody, we are kind of like understanding the audio, it just kind of like somebody little bit pleasing and things like that. We just think, oh, cute and things like that. But they might gonna say, fuck you, human and things like that. Then this might be kind of like a things that, dude, Just imagine a context that, imagine a kind of like a scenario that you went to the forest and everyone is kind of like a chaos, like every insects and every animal are kind of like a say, fuck you human and fuck you. What the fuck is that? I'm just came here for trekking. It's like, fuck out. Like basically every animal are kind of like a say fuck you and things like that. It's just like, what the fuck is this thing? Okay, yeah. One thing, okay, yeah, you might gonna see lot of chaos. Like every animal are kind of like somebody yelling and things and that because they are in too much in number. So probably they just kind of like somebody yelling all the time, and you just kind of like say, just shut up. Just shut up. You just might gonna there is a one thing is that according to their size, there might not have kind of like somebody have that much pitch of sound. Okay, another is a spider. Okay, yeah, you haven't really kind of like heard the kind of like a spider noise because the spider are kind of like a somebody very tiny animal, and probably regarding about their size, they might not kind of like a somebody create that much amount of sound and things like that. But imagine in this scenario, a spider could kind of like a speak like a kind of like a somebody the like us, like the way that I'm kind of like a speaking and things like that. Bhai, you might gonna scared and things like that. You just kind of like a fuck off that spider. Okay, this is the one thing. Another thing is that because of the every animal kind of like a understand each other, because we every animal and species and humans are kind of like speaking one language and things like that, we might gonna understand the animals. Okay, yeah, and also animal gonna understand us. Okay, animal gonna understand us, which is somewhat something good, but probably it's kind of like a create another problem. Okay, yeah, what kind of like a problem? Privacy. Imagine you went to kind of like a mall and you wanted to buy some sort of clothes. Okay, yeah. Now you like the clothes and you kind of like take that clothes and went to the kind of like a trial room. And in the trial room, there is a kind of like in the corner there is a spider who is kind of like looking at you. Then what exactly is this thing? Your privacy get violated now. Like basically that spider gonna say, "Oh, you look very sexy," and I'm like, "Fuck you." Like, what the fuck is this? This might kind of like it's just like that. Not really a good thing, nah. Like invasion of privacy. Okay, yeah. Now this is just I'm talking about the trial room. Okay, let's just say kind of like a CIA secret mission. Okay, yeah. And in the secret mission, might be kind of like an animal would be kind of like somebody really camouflage things. Like they have kind of like a spices. Would be let's just say the Russian spices, like basically the not spices, Russian spy. Okay, yeah. Let's just say pigeons are the Russian spy. Okay, yeah. So basically, they can go anywhere. Like they are actually available in every planet of the corner and things like that. So what is they gonna do? The Russian government will gonna say to the kind of like somebody Russian pigeon that you just have to go to the America and kind of like look at the what the CIA do, what does kind of like a things, and they have to kind of like give them a secret missions, and those pigeons are kind of like a fly over there and kind of like a giving them kind of like a, some sort of information regarding about CIA. What does they do? Oh my god. I'm just kind of like narrating that movie script name Pigeon in the Sky. Probably. This might be kind of like a really good. Okay, yeah. But still, is this thing, if you're gonna kind of like communicate with those species, there are so many good things will gonna happen. First of all is that because of they speak, okay, they will gonna kind of like mention regarding about how much human are affecting on the environment, like cutting down the trees and things and kind of like air pollution and things like that. Because of our growth, their kind of like a species are kind of like a dying and things like that. So they would kind of like actually mention, they would kind of like do the strike, or they would kind of like attack us or whatever it is. Okay, yeah. So because of this thing happen, we will try to kind of like make sure that this will not gonna happen. But still is this thing that, okay, let me tell you one thing. Okay, growth means what? Okay, yeah. Like let me look at around yourself. You are actually seeing the buildings and cars and things and that. Is it called growth? Well, basically I call them growth, yeah. But is it growth for me or growth for the entire planet? Like this is the kind of like question that we have to ask, na? Okay, yeah. Because if I'm seeing that a kind of like a big building and kind of like a better infrastructure and things and that, it would be considered as my growth, but it would be kind of like a disaster for other species, right? Because of when I try to create this kind of like a city, I'm kind of like a deforestation, I'm kind of like cut down the trees and things like that. So basically is this in growth meaning to what? Like basically growth meaning to me or growth meaning to the kind of like something is very vague thing. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that na ki let's just say is that ki for us like basically having a better communication, so that's why we are kind of like building the better satellites and things and that. But what if the birds could decided that no, it's not really good thing and we have to kind of like destroy the satellites and things and that, and kind of like one battalion of the kind of like eagle kind of like a fly that higher and kind of like a destroy the satellite. No, they will not gonna fly into the space definitely at all, but still is this thing they would gonna figure it out that kind of like somebody the space station where it launched all the satellite, they would kind of like destroy that thing. Probably is this thing they would kind of like destroy the mechanism and things before it launch and stuff like that. It would be kind of like a really devastating. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we would be kind of like a focus on environmental factor. Okay, yeah, but still it's not. Okay, I'm gonna tell you kind of like a truth. Okay, yeah. Now, like this is the truth of the world, and you just have to understand. If you not really understand, it's reality. Okay, what is that? Is this thing? Everything are not meant to be permanent. Okay, yeah. If you think that the growth is comes with the consequences, and most of the time that consequences it's not right. Okay, example, let's just say that ki I wanted to build the road in the jungle. What I have to do, I have to kind of like build the road. Now for me road is very essential. Okay, yeah, because it kind of like a communicate and transport and things and that. So I build the road, I have kind of like that infrastructure, I have this technology and things like that, I kind of like do this thing. So because of this thing I destroy that particular forest, not entirely destroy the forest but kind of like make a road on that. Okay, yeah. So at some certain point that kind of like something is this thing that key other species would kind of like face the problem regarding about that changes. Okay, yeah. Do you think that only other species or other animal are kind of like facing the problem, we are human are not facing the problem of the human growth and things like that? If you're not really understanding, let's just give me an example. Okay, yeah. There is a G20 meeting is actually happened in India a couple of years ago, and in the G20 meeting, G20 is a global meeting. Okay, where kind of like all the G20 countries, they all the minister came to the India. Okay, yeah, and they kind of like simply the have particular meeting in every corner of the India, kind of like a talk about the global perspective and things and what should we supposed to do, solve the problems regarding about the global issues and things like that. Okay, now G20 meeting is a kind of like a somewhat something when the meeting is actually the which countries actually represent that meeting, that country has a responsibility to kind of like cater them very properly. Okay, yeah. Now properly means what? A kind of like when they are kind of like commuting from hotel to event, make sure their every road is a clean, or we shouldn't supposed to show the poverty and things like that. Okay, yeah. So for that particular purpose, the Indian government kind of like put the barricades so that so the people who are kind of like poor, they will not kind of like simply seen on things like that. Okay, yeah, because it's not really good thing. Okay, it's kind of like simply damaging the Indian image of things like that. So is this growth belongs to what? Like basically in the G20 meeting, we are meant to be kind of like simply talk about the peace and things and that. But while doing it that, we are kind of like simply hurting some sort of feelings or some sort of kind of like somebody is this thing that I don't know. It's like basically is this thing now. Every time there is something happen, the loss of life is actually happen. Okay, yeah, to the human, to the animal, to everything, and that is somewhat something really true. Oh yeah, because is this thing na ki if your government thinks that ki we are kind of like building this law for kind of like a better communication or better government or things like that, yes, they have kind of like a same agenda to kind of like make the better government and things like that. But for this particular purposes, they kind of like a lost someone lives, or they might kind of like a lost some sort of kind of like some revenue system or things or that and that. Okay, yeah. Example, okay, if you still not really understand, let's just take an example. I'm belong to the India. Okay, yeah. And in India, the kind of like a driverless car is kind of like a not possible. Like basically is this thing that India Indian kind of like a infrastructure or a road manufacturing minister, they mentioned that ki driverless car we are not kind of like authorized in India. Okay, yeah. Why? Because of that ki it's not really good, and all the kind of like a, almost like a driving community of the people would kind of like a lost the job and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now, when this thing actually happened, the people who are kind of like associated with the kind of like assembly, the tech and manufacture, they will kind of might gonna say this is a very wrong step. Okay, yeah. Why we are stopping for a technology enhancement where kind of like assembly building the loss of people job and things like that? Why we are doing is this thing? We should supposed to be cater the new technology, and we should supposed to adopt the new technology. Huh? Probably people will might gonna lose, but people will find gonna another job. It's not meant to be that because of the people lost their job we will might not gonna do the technology. Okay, yeah. So in this particular context, you just have to understand when we try to grow, there are some sort of people will kind of actually lost their some sort of jobs and lives and things like that. Okay, yeah. Even if the government try to prevent, but how much time that government will gonna prevent? Somewhat someday government will gonna kind of like assembly accept this thing that ki yes, driverless car should supposed to be authorized in our country, because this is what growth is actually happen. Okay, yeah. Like basically the robots will kind of like take the job of humans and things like that, which is kind of like consider as a growth, but simultaneously people lost their jobs and things like that, which is okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you, what exactly is this thing? Maybe this kind of like assembly question, this kind of like assembly the statement is not completely not relevant to the kind of like assembly question. Yeah, but what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: we are human, and we have a same language, somewhat something probably. Okay, yeah. But after all those things, we still not communicate with another human. We still not communicate with another human. Okay, yeah. So how do we supposed to be ready for the quadrillions of animal could kind of like speak with us, and do we kind of like simply treat them very properly? Do we kind of like understand them? Do we kind of like simply it's not possible. Who actually kind of like lead the world? Who actually have kind of like simply have kind of like a better control over there? Which kind of like a species would rule the world and things like that? Is it human? Is it bird? Is it horse? Or is it what? Or maybe it's just like that now, who is actually kind of like a take the responsibility for kind of like leading the world, for having better intelligence? Then dolphin would have kind of like a better intelligence because they are actually more intelligent than us. Okay, yeah. Or whale or things like that. What exactly is this thing? How do we supposed to be understand who is actually leading the world or not? So this is what kind of like a somebody very different, and this is what kind of like a somebody that we don't have to understand that ki even if we have same languages, we still have kind of like a simply the problem with us and surrounding and things like that. Like even if we have kind of like a same language, same communication, we might not solve other people's problem. How do we ready for kind of like solving other species of problems and things like that? And will it gonna kind of like assembly we will gonna understand somewhere? No, we will not. Okay, because still is this thing, every human is kind of like a very different. Obviously is this thing, the thing that I'm kind of like a mention mostly somewhat something associated with me, somewhat something not. And at this moment people are not in the same page. How do I supposed to be kind of like somebody feel that ki every species of the kind of like a planet or every species would kind of like have a same in page, like they have kind of like a same thought process? That is not. And also nature doesn't really want you to do like that, because let me tell you one thing na, ki in the nature, let's just say this universe actually create the planet and things like that, every person is kind of like a very different, every species is kind of like a bit different, is because of they are meant to be different. They are meant to be kind of like a building the life and things like that. Like basically the way that I'm thinking and the way that you are thinking is completely different, is not a wrong, is a right thing. Is a right thing. It's kind of like a thing is that it kind of like consider as a different thought process. If we are both are kind of like a thinking the same thought process, then what's the difference between us and robot? There is nothing really wrong in that particular context. Okay, yeah. So the question is that basically what if we could kind of like communicate with the animals or things like that, or what if we could speak to the kind of like other animal, what kind of like that reality would be? First thing, that reality is kind of like assembly equilaterally not possible, okay, in every possible way. But still, if I started imagining this thing, chaos will gonna happen. Okay, there is nothing really kind of like assembly is this thing that like there is only option, there is only kind of like a stuff that I'm seeing is the chaos, and that's it. Okay, peace will definitely will not gonna establish, because in today's world we have to maintain the peace with 8 billion people. If that particular happen, we have to maintain the peace with a kind of like a somebody 10 quadrillion species, and this is equally impossible. Okay, yeah. So what is actually peace, what is actually kind of like a things, it's still we not really understand, and things like that. The nature is created, this world is meant for what it is, and we have to respect that thing. If the animal couldn't able to talk, we have to respect that. Okay, yeah. But it doesn't meant to be kind of like a hurt them or things like that, but it doesn't meant to be kind of like a somebody, I don't know how do I supposed to explain this stuff. It's something that na ki I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes I'm just kind of like completely blank in this particular context. Whatever, this is just my opinion regarding about this particular stuff. All right, yeah. So this is it. Thank you.